Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And this week is our minor league preview special. Special effects. We are definitely not experts in the Orioles minor leagues, but we like to talk about them because it's fun, at least for now. It'll probably not be as fun in a couple years when the Orioles are good, right? But for now,
are we experts in the major leagues, Tyler?
That's a good point.
That's very debatable. Yeah. So,
to be totally transparent, if you guys want an Orioles podcast that is really good with the minor leagues, On the Verge is your place to go. Those guys are awesome. They do a great job on Twitter with sharing video highlights and bringing on guests on their show. So, they are the podcast experts on the minor leagues, but it's fun to talk about them. The Orioles have a really good minor league setup right now. It's exciting. The games are affordable. They're usually closer to your communities than it is. It's easier to get to them than sometimes going downtown and all that stuff. So we'll talk about it. Eli just said he's going to go to the Bowie Bay Sox home opener, which is exciting.
In fact, I will be meeting up with Joey Ortiz's parents beforehand.
Wow.
And getting dinner with them and then going to see the home opener.
So we should say, because if there's a new listener, they probably don't know. They probably think that's very odd that you're just meeting with Joey Ortiz's parents. So
it's fair.
Why would you be doing that, Eli?
I will admit, I personally do not know the parents, but Joey Ortiz played on a summer team with me that my parents were involved with the organization. So we hosted a bunch of students and Joey stayed with us for part of that summer. And I obviously played with him for the whole summer. So my parents know his parents. They're going to hang out. I'm going to go watch the game, and I think I'll get a free dinner out of it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Jesse, you're not going, Jess?
I actually don't know. I got to figure that out. I actually don't know. So I actually think I'm not going to make the game because of working and stuff like that. So
that's a bummer, but still very cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
taking advantage.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell Eli to send them my regards and send them my best. So yeah.
And Eli will be secretly recording the dinner, and we'll have clips of that next weekend.
We'll be live streaming on Twitter. Actually.
So that's very cool. Very exciting. This year, the seasons kind of line up, the minors and the majors, whereas normally the majors have been going for a little bit before the minor leagues get underway, but CBA stuff happens, so that's not the case this year. But so let's talk minor league baseball. First, to kind of get everybody up to speed on where the Orioles sit in terms of all the rankings have come out recently. All the different big organizations have, put out where they think the respective organizations sit in the pecking order. The big one that we care about because it's the most positive is MLB Pipeline. They rank the Orioles as the top farm system in all of baseball. That has them up from 5th place this time last year, which is huge. Baseball America has them down at 4th, however, on the rise, and they've really liked Rayshon Rodriguez, I think, for the longest amount of time out of all the big ranking systems. So that's been cool. And then Keith Law has the Orioles as his 10th best system, which there's a lot of Keith Law haters in the Orioles community. We're aware. He did move them up from 18th last year. Eli, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to make it very, very clear that we are also part of the Keith Law haters.
Hey.
Sometimes. I don't know. It definitely, at this time when MLB Pipeline had us at number 5 last year, he had us at number 18, not even in the top half of the league. So I really, I don't know. I don't
feel disrespectful.
I don't get where the disconnect is. And it's just this, he is constantly further down on the Orioles. And it's that doesn't extend to every other team that he's just I'm just more down on every other team. He's always just more down on the Orioles and the Orioles prospects. And I get tired of it, but he also The Athletic is a really wonderful newspaper. They do a lot of good stuff. So I felt the need to put him in the outline anyways.
Well, and look, this is all subjective to a degree. Like, yes, there's quantitative data on performance and all that stuff, but then there's the art of it where you have to take that quantitative data and massage it a little bit into projecting these players. And Keith Law is just doing his version of that because it's not an exact science. He does note in his column or his rankings that he basically has the Orioles as high as you could possibly be and as good as you could possibly be with a very little Latin American influence, which the Orioles are still working on that. And that is a valid criticism, something we can maybe talk about here in a minute. But he also notes that it's skewed towards position players, which again, we know that. So if your rankings are based on balance and all of that stuff, the Orioles maybe don't have the most balanced. But if you also have like 5 of the best players in all of the minor leagues, that should account heavily as well. So, there's a couple ways.
Having Adley Rutschman in your system should be worth something.
Literally,
that's my opinion. So
to round it all out, Tyler said a bunch of nice political things, but Keith Law's wrong. And the Orioles have an elite farm system right now.
Right. And I think that's fair. I think they certainly have elite players in there. I like the farm system. It definitely feels a lot different and a lot more positive than it had prior to Elias's influence. So I can't really complain there. But again, what am I comparing it? I'm comparing it to years when the Orioles were good at the major league level and they were constantly trading away interesting prospects. So They were understandably low. Where, if you look at Keith Law's rankings just specifically, if you go to the bottom, the teams in the bottom are teams that were good or are good. Usually the White Sox are his 30th ranked team. They're very good right now. And they're bad in the minors because they have all their good players are up now. The Athletics are 29th. I can't figure that one out, but that's happening. Then the Phillies are down there. The Nationals are down there. Like, these are teams that are good. Well, the Nationals are bad, but they won a World Series a couple years ago. Like, that's just what happens. So I don't know. I'm not going to defend Keith Law, to my grave, but just trying to give some understanding for where he's coming from. But I mean, Eli, let's just talk about the system then. How are you feeling about the system? You don't think they're 10th, so how are you feeling?
Yeah, I do not think they're 10th. I think that the high level talent in the Orioles system is as good as you can find anywhere across the major leagues. I think that, some other teams like the Mariners are up there. Like, you always see the Dodgers, you always see the Rays. They definitely are on par with all of the elite farm systems in the major leagues. And I think the one knock that I do have, which you alluded to and Keith Law alluded to, whatever, is that there is a lack of pitching once you get past, or a lack of high level pitching once you get past the DL Halls, Bradish's, Rodriguez's, etc. I think that, this is definitely a result of the Orioles having drafted almost exclusively position players and, preferring college position players, etc. in the last couple drafts. And granted, I think that has been wildly successful. You look at, you look at the Kausers, the Norbies, the et cetera, coming up through the low levels of our minors right now. And then even Kyle Stowers is about to break into the majors, Jordan Westberg, et cetera, et cetera. There have been really, really good results from drafting college position players. But I think that once you graduate Rodriguez, Hall, Bradish this year, we'll definitely find ourselves in a situation where we're looking for a continuation of that high level talent on the pitching side. Yeah,
that's a valid criticism for sure. I can talk about my thoughts there in a second, but Jesse, how are you feeling about the Orioles minor leagues?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, as we can see kind of from, this major league roster construction and, our predictions and whatever, right? We definitely have a bunch of hopefully serviceable, guys that are ready to pitch in the major leagues, even if not immediately, but hopefully, within the next year or two. Right. But these are not high level prospects, right? These are not future number twos, right? They are future hopefully back end pieces, right? So we have I feel like in our minors, we have a bunch of guys that are kind of floating around that could be, best case scenario, probably a 4 or a 5, but beyond Grayson Rodriguez, right? Like Eli's saying, it's rather thin.
Yeah. And I mean, my thought is just that definitely seems to be by design. Whatever methods the Orioles have for evaluating prospects, they clearly feel either more confident in their ability to project hitters, or they just feel that hitters in general are more stable, which is probably, I think,
more projectable. Yeah.
Yeah, the data that they have in college, because again, they favor college hitters. College data translates easier to the pros and the majors than pitching data does. So why not double down on that and go, we're really good at this. Let's focus on it. And it's, yielding good results. Rutschman has been as good as advertised. Gunnar Henderson, they found him intriguing and they've made him into a top 100 prospect. Colton Cowser looked really solid in his first summer as a professional. And part of that is also, I think that they believe that they can potentially wait on pitchers, let them get some professional data, and then maybe find them and take them from other organizations and make them a little bit better. That's what they've done with all of the arms they've taken from the Angels so far, which is just like a little bit humiliating because the Angels have no pitchers. That's a whole issue the Angels have in the organization. And now the Orioles have, Bradish and Zach Peak and Zach Bernovich, like they're all turning into viable arms with the Orioles. So I think the Orioles just kind of have a philosophy there. And also, people have talked about this with the pitching too, which is frustrating, is that, there's not enough arms to make a major league rotation in the Orioles minor league system right now. What minor league system has a full future big league rotation in it right now? I would imagine very, very few. They're going to have to sign free agents. They're going to have to trade some of these hitters. Some of these good hitters are not going to play for the Orioles. That's just the reality. So I totally get the criticism, but I don't necessarily see it as a weakness, more of a concerted strategy to build a team. It might not work, but at least there is a direction, which I appreciate.
Well, yeah. I mean, and if you were to add to the pitching, you would be subtracting the benefits of the position players that we have. So, right. It'd be a trade-off if we had emphasized that more. Right.
Yeah. I guess the best example of that is, you cannot have Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, Colton Cowser, Kyle Stowers, Robert Newstrom, Heston Kjerstad, like any number of pretty, high-level outfield prospects and a couple current major leaguers that we have. They can't all fit in one outfield. So we are inevitably going to be trading from the depth that we have. And it should reiterate, this is an elite level system with the total talent that we have acquired. And how the Orioles sort of deploy that talent and take advantage of that talent is what the ultimate deciding factor will be and how good that major league team is.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's a clear strategy. I will say, I think there were reports last year that, prior to selecting Colton Cowser, the Orioles had thought about taking Jack Leiter. Now, Jack Leiter ended up going prior to the Orioles picking, but was clearly the top pitching prospect available in the draft. And there were reports that the Orioles coveted him. And, it's not like they're avoiding pitchers altogether, but the criteria is clearly very strict when it comes to selecting those players with the high dollar picks. So, I think that's fine. I think it's totally fine to go into the draft room and develop your minor league system with a strategy. It's how you build up this pipeline that Elias has talked about ad nauseum since becoming the boss for the Orioles. That's kind of the take on the current system as it stands. So now we want to get into, let's talk about just the top prospects here that have changed from last year. And if we have thoughts on any of these guys, certainly feel free to jump in, you guys. But according to MLB Pipeline, the Orioles have 5 top 100 prospects. Adley Rutschman comes in at number 2 on their list. He was number 1 last year. Bobby Witt Jr. has leapfrogged him, and Bobby Witt Jr. is now making the Royals opening day roster, and that has infuriated people on Twitter, but it is what it is. Other names, Grayson Rodriguez is 6th. He's the top pitching prospect on their list. Gunnar Henderson, 64, Colton Cowser, 66, and DL Hall, 90. The only player there to drop in their rankings was DL Hall from 72nd down to 90th. Although I will say, like, places like Fangraphs have him up in like the 40s. So there's a lot of variance on DL Hall. But what do you think about those guys, Eli? Are you satisfied with where they sit in Pipeline's rankings?
Yeah, you have to be happy with it. We're tied for the second most players of any farm system in these top 100 rankings. There's one team that has 6 players in it, or maybe 2 teams, but we've got 5 players in the top 100. If you think there are 30 teams in the MLB and 100 in these rankings, you should have 3.3,
right,
on average. So we definitely have more high-level talent than the majority of farm systems out there. The one thing I'll cue in on with Hall, he was 72nd last year, dropped to 90th. Clearly he was hurt and he missed half the season. I do not think that, the 40% strikeout rate is what made MLB Pipeline sour on him. Clearly, when he's healthy, the guy is elite and performs at an extremely high level. So I think that's purely a reflection of the injury concerns with him, which there have always been. And there's still a lot of reason to be high on him, I guess I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jesse, and I'll say Fangraphs has DL Hall as the 28th best prospect in all of baseball.
Right.
So like that is the sort of stuff we're talking about. But they also have him as a very high risk type of player too. And that explains why MLB Pipeline's a little bit more conservative on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess when I'm looking at the list, of course, I think Adley and Grayson are both, of course, as close to sure bets as any sort of prospect can be. They're both, I mean, the Orioles are relying on them to be able to set them in stone, right? As far as like Gunnar Henderson seems more of like a high ceiling guy, but Colton Cowser seems more of like a higher floor type player to me. I think both Henderson and Hall, I think they have a ton of potential, but I think Colton Cowser is kind of the safer player among the three, kind of more reliable, and that we can be more sure that he will be a major league contributor. I think Henderson and Hall are much more have much more volatility in what their future will look like.
Yeah, that's totally valid. Some other places, I'll just say Fangraphs has the Orioles with 6 players in their top 100. They add Kobe Mayo in there as well, who is a player that has gotten a lot of like juice over the last couple months. He's kind of this year's version of Gunnar Henderson, where Gunnar Henderson was like jumping up the boards, and now it's Kobe Mayo. And I feel like we should kind of talk about him for a second. I know we didn't kind of lay that out here, but Kobe Mayo, I mean, kind of like he's a beast. He's like 6'5". Just a 6'5", 215, currently playing third base, although places expect him to move to the outfield at some point. Eli, a scouting report on Kobe Mayo?
Yeah, I guess the short synopsis of him is he just hits the ball. I mean, he's got a ton of power. He's posting really ridiculous exit velocities, up approaching 110 miles an hour. And, he was supposed to be a bit of a free swinger with some swing and miss in his game. He seemed like he had a really solid approach, as he got into low A last year. I think this is it's definitely one of the more intriguing prospects in the Orioles system. He's got a ton of pop, and they say they've really been working with his defense. He's got an incredibly strong arm. I think they gave it like a 65 grade arm over at third base. So he's clearly got the arm for right field if he does eventually need to move there. But he really looked pretty solid over at third base last year. I think there is nothing to not like about Kobe Mayo, and I would be extremely surprised if at this time next year we're doing this podcast and he's not in the top 100, much less, like in the 70s and below.
Yeah, Jesse, any thoughts on Kobe Mayo? I know we don't talk,
No,
haven't
yeah,
talked about him a ton, but yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, kind of like Eli said, like I'm waiting for him to break into the top 100 too. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, I mean, he does kind of make the, the outfield kind of, a lot more crowded, kind of as we're talking about. Yeah, and he's definitely one of the guys that, I mean, Kowser too, but I think kind of like you were saying before, I think eventually one of these guys is going to get traded and dealt away. So I think that is a possibility for his future, but yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's important to remember about a lot of this is they're going to get dealt. We can't fall in love with all these guys because it's just not realistic. But we'll see. I think we won't see those deals happen this year. At least we shouldn't. So you can dream on these guys for a bit longer. So I think he's definitely the one to watch that a lot of people have tabbed as like this is the dude. And if he is that level of player, I don't think he'll be one of those guys that goes because if he's gonna leapfrog a bunch of guys. You would see some other players get dealt before a guy that you think is going to hold down a corner position with that kind of power and those kind of skills. I mean, I wouldn't want to trade him, but it's still early. But
well, I'm just curious. Are you bigger on him than Kowser? I mean, it definitely seems like he probably has a higher ceiling, I would say.
Well, Kowser, they've talked about Kowser playing some center field, it's all in flux right now. That's the thing is we don't have to set anything right now. You can let this year go through. You can see if Cedric Mullins is going to be that legitimate everyday center fielder again this year. And then that changes the math again. So not that I like him more than Kowser, but also it's not certain that he is a right fielder or a left fielder
in
yet.
Competition with them. Right.
Yeah. He's still playing third base.
Yeah, I think people are getting more and more confident that he's going to stay at third, too. I mean, I think last year really, really pointed that direction.
Right, and then that brings him into this conversation with Henderson and Westberg and Ortiz. Right. Well, maybe not Ortiz as much, but at least Henderson and Westberg. So we'll see. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to sort that out just yet.
Right.
A storyline to follow this year is going to be a couple of players that are returning from injuries last year. And for the Orioles, it's a pretty significant batch of prospects. It includes Heston Kjerstad, who we know has had the issue with myocarditis, has not played a professional game yet. Joey Ortiz is coming back from, I think he had an arm injury last year.
Labrum,
there you go. DL Hall had the stress reaction, and it sounds like he's good to go. And then Carter Baumler had Tommy John. So those are 3 or 4 pretty significant players. Jesse, do you have anything there that you're kind of looking for from them as you don't have to go through every player, but is there anything you're really going to be looking for as they come back from injury to kind of indicate to you like these guys are back and maybe can kind of restart their development a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, out of the 4 of them, I would say Ortiz is the one that I'm like least worried about overall. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think, as far as Kjerstad goes, right, like this is kind of a big concern, right? Like, I mean, we need to see him get into games and to like actually, we want him to actually begin his development, right, as a prospect instead of, being behind, just playing catch up just to get to like a baseline level of like being healthy and being able to play baseball, right? So, I mean, in terms of him, like, just having him actually playing and then be able to be learning and advancing and, improving, is like really a big deal for him. I mean, as far as the other guys, like not in particular, obviously Hall, just like, I mean, really for him, like just staying healthy, obviously, the command stuff, right, is a big thing, right? But, like for him, just being healthy is like, really important. But yeah, like Ortiz, I think will bounce back fine. And yeah, I think it'll be, I'm not like overly worried. The only guy I'm really worried about is like Kjerstad and like his injury concerns. So.
Hey, and he's got the hamstring now, which the report there is he's out 8 to 12 weeks from when it occurred, which was a couple weeks ago. So we might not see him till midsummer, which is disappointing. But there's no reason to rush him back at this point. Eli, what's your read on the injury situation there on the minors?
Yeah, kind of a similar take. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily worried about Kjerstad. I don't want this to come off callous, but we've gotten more and more outfield prospects in the system, and so at this point, we need Heston Kjerstad to be good, like to a lesser degree. Mm-hmm. We just don't need him to be as good anymore. That said, like at this point, I want him to just get on the field and succeed, like just for his own sake. I think it'd be a win for the entire organization just to see him healthy and out there. It'd be, a feel good thing. And I'm definitely rooting for him. Ortiz, the injury was to his non-throwing shoulder. So I definitely, that gives you a little bit of confidence that he'll be able to bounce back. That said, what the big jump was last year for him is he's always had a good arm. He's always been a great defender. But it was strength through his swing and, posting some higher exit velocities was really the jump that he had made. So it will be interesting to see if he can maintain that. They are going to start him at AA, so they've definitely got some confidence that he'll be able to maintain. Hall is Hall. We've talked about him ad nauseum, but Baumler, I think, is maybe the most interesting one here. The Orioles do not go for high school prospects very often. Under Mike Elias, Baumler was a two-way player that we liked more as a pitcher, drafted him as a pitcher. And, we've been seeing videos throughout this offseason of him, doing some running guns, some heavy pull downs at 98 miles an hour. So he's got a big arm, and they actually talked about him as a more athletic and pitchability guy than a stuff guy. So it definitely seems like he's been developing himself even during the time of his injury. If we can, combine some of that pitchability that he had in high school with the 4-pitch mix with, this new version of him throwing 98 miles an hour, really developing the velocity and the strength aspect, I think he could be a really, really exciting pitching prospect.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, he's definitely – the Orioles have shown an ability to take players, pitchers in particular, and add velocity to them, work with them on technique or strength conditioning, all that stuff to really give them a couple more ticks on the speedometer, which would be huge for him. So I do agree there. I think I'm with Jesse on the Kjerstad thing is something I'm really interested to follow because – yeah, Eli, you're right that we don't need him, quote unquote, need him as bad now, given the rest of the system around him. But just to think of what the difference would be if the Orioles had gone any other direction with that second overall pick a couple weeks ago, having a player that had already gotten a season plus under their belt, where would that person be in the rankings? It changes the complexion again, even if it was another outfielder. It's just something there that it's still going to hang in my brain a little bit. So I think I agree. We need to see him on the field. I need to see him hit a couple home runs. That was the big thing is he was the biggest power bat in the draft, at least from the college side of things. It just makes you think, what if the Orioles had done literally anything else there with that pick? Right. Now they did draft him. They had the savings that they ended up using later in the draft to get Kobe Mayo and to get Carter Baumler. So it all is connected. But yeah, Kjerstad is someone I'm going to be watching closely as soon as he gets on the field, and I'm excited to see him get some action. But I am happy that there are others around him that allow the Orioles to kind of slow things down just a little bit. I think another thing to kind of pay attention to this year is going to be the starting arrival of some of the Orioles' international prospects. Down on the minor league. They're not going to be up at the big leagues yet, we wouldn't think. But this was one of those things that Mike Elias made a priority, was developing the Orioles setup down in the Latin American countries to recruit these players and to get them into the Orioles system, something that they did not do under Dan Duquette. And we are now going to start to see some of those guys come up and play in affiliated ball. That includes Cesar Prieto, who the Orioles signed this offseason. He's actually a little bit older. He's 22, but we would expect to see him somewhere down in the lower minors. Samuel Basayo is a catcher who is only 17. He might get up into Delmarva at some point. Michael Hernandez is another one who is only 18, but he could be up. Just a couple of these names that it's sort of exciting that, not that they're going to come up and blow our doors off and be top 100 prospects, but just the fact that the Orioles are starting to compete and have that other avenue of talent coming into the organization. Eli, what are your thoughts, and what are you looking for from the international guys this year?
Yeah, I guess I'll cue in on Prieto because he's the one that, I think will have the most forward-facing impacts. I think that, he should start this year, maybe even in Double-A. I think he's currently slated for like low A, and we'll probably start him lower than that. But I think by the end of the year, this is a guy who broke the hits record that Kendrys Morales had set in the Cuban National League. So, he's got some pretty elite bat to ball skills. They say he's an average defender at second base, but this is a already pretty advanced prospect. And it's somebody who has had professional experience, although it wasn't, obviously in America or in affiliated baseball. But I'm super intrigued to see how high he can rise. Part of me, is fully confident that if he really has the bat to ball skills that everybody talks about, that this is somebody who can go ahead and potentially be in AAA by the end of the year and potentially in Baltimore in 2023.
Yeah. I mean, the Cuban players are always interesting because it's not always super clear what the level of talent they're playing against is, but if it pays off, it's huge. And he plays second base. The Orioles need a second baseman. That would be awesome. Jesse, what about you? Are you looking for anything in particular from the international players this year?
Yeah, I mean, these guys, kind of like you were saying, I mean, other than Prieto, I mean, the guys are so far away from like the major league field, right? So I'm not exactly sure about the lower half guys, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of the whole point, right? Is that we haven't seen these guys. It would be awesome to see them play for an affiliate that is near us against other prospects we know about and get some data on them just to like actually form an opinion on them that's not entirely based on what other people say about them.
Right.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
The next thing I want to talk about is the draft. The Orioles do have the number one pick in the draft this year, and it seems that they're going to have a pick of some really talented players. I had linked it, and I lost it a second ago. Let me grab it right here. So it sounds like the number one option right now is Drew Jones, who is Andrew Jones' son. He's a high schooler outfielder. Tamar Johnson, another high schooler, plays infield, though. Elijah Green was the name a year ago people were thinking about. Again, a high schooler. So, Eli, you had talked before, the Orioles don't typically go for high schoolers, even if they're position players. So going into this draft, which we've still got a couple months here, so things can change, what do you think the strategy for the Orioles needs to be? Like best player available, go try to save some money for later in the draft? What are your thoughts?
I think I'm of the mind that, now that we have built a solid foundation of a farm system under us, I think that we're now in a situation where we can go ahead and we can take a shot on a high schooler. And Drew Jones, Tamar Johnson, and Elijah Green all have insane tools. I think Drew Jones is the most well-rounded of all of them, it's sounding like. And so I say take a shot. We have the number one pick. Go get, the highest potential talent. Obviously, there's always more risk. A lot of people were talking about the likes of Chase DeLauter, as another college outfielder with a big bat. Brock Jones with Stanford. These are the kinds of picks that the Orioles would typically go for. And if we stick with, the underslot strategy that we have taken in the past couple of years, I would not be surprised at all to see one of Jones or DeLauder or maybe even Jacob Berry. I guess Jace Young too, although I think that the Orioles might have some problems with a guy who's like constrained to second base as a defender with the number 1 pick. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I think that the Orioles have built enough talent, like enough of a base of talent in the farm system to start to take shots on some high schoolers and, some prep school guys now. So I'm on team Drew Jones.
Okay. He's put his flag in the ground at Drew Jones. Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to replicate that. The thing is, like, when Andrew Jones, like, for people who don't remember, was a, potential Hall of Famer, like when he first came into the league, right? I think he came when he was like 20 or 21, like he made his major league debut. So I get that, Drew Jones is not his father, right?
Right.
But what I will say is that I always kind of I highly value having, major league background pedigree, right? And I think that is just so important and so critical. Not only that you have, someone kind of to guide you, right? But, just everything when you kind of grow up in that environment and you're around Major League Baseball, and that's kind of like the expectation, and you have kind of that sort of that path in life kind of carved out for you in a sense, right? I definitely think like it makes a big difference. Obviously the notable one, right, that we're seeing now is Vladimir Guerrero, who, we can basically, I feel like, already kind of pencil him in for the Hall of Fame, right? But yeah, regardless of that, I definitely think Drew Jones is like the direction I'd like to see the Orioles go in. Right. I kind of talked in the past, like I wasn't excited. When the Orioles have the number 1 pick, I want, the number 1 prospect, right? I want the top guy. Like this is, if ever, like, of course, hopefully fans remember like when the Orioles had Machado, right? Right now when we're having Adley Rutschman, like these are just like so instrumental to an organization. And I think the other point that Eli made that is also really important to highlight here is that the Orioles have enough prospects to compete within the next several years, right? Like not this year, of course, right? But, in the next couple years after that, there should be enough prospects in the pipeline that, we should be good, right? So I think now is the time that we're able to kind of take a chance. And who knows, Drew Jones might accelerate through the minor leagues, right? But even if he doesn't come up for 4 or 5 years, right? Like that's still okay, I think, because the Orioles do have the depth, in the minor leagues positionally and for position players where we can rely on Kobe Mayo, we can rely on Kowser, etc. where, and we can take a chance, or, not even a chance, but we can draft a high school guy and not need them to be in the major leagues in a couple years. Right. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you guys are saying. Look, and we said this at the top, we're certainly not experts on any of this. We are not scouts or anything. We read scouting reports that others prepare and kind of make decisions based upon that. I think Drew Jones has like the tools. He is definitely like of these guys that they could potentially pick is like the most intriguing skill set for sure. Something about Tamar Johnson feels like a Mike Elias pick though. If you're going to go high schooler, it's this guy that's got the hit tool that lowers his floor automatically. Yeah, he doesn't play the sexiest position at second base, but he's going to be like that guy that you can probably put at the top of the lineup. The Tony Gwynn type of bat is sort of what it sounds like. I would take Tony Gwynn. Now that's a Hall of Famer. So of course, I'm not saying you're really sacrificing there, but he's also 7 months younger than Drew Jones, which is not a lot, but 17 versus 18 at the time of the draft. Like, I think the Orioles have their models that you plug in age, and that is a factor where if you're younger and you're still doing the same type of production that an older a prospect is, that's more valuable. I could like spin myself into thinking that like Tamar Johnson makes more sense based on decisions that the Orioles have made. But also, it's only April. These guys are still going to play summer ball. They're going to put more data down that things can change. You know, when you're 17, your body's changing all the time. You're adding muscle. You're doing all these things. These rankings could change in that time. So I think I'm kind of just at the part where I want the best player for sure. And if the Orioles think that is Drew Jones, take Drew Jones. If they think it is Tamar Johnson, take Tamar Johnson. But what seems to be happening is it's all these top guys are all high schoolers for the most part, and the Orioles are not going to get like that discount that we've talked about in years prior if they go for best player available. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out, but I'm with you guys that I would like the best player available, whoever the Orioles think that may be.
So you're not going to be satisfied with them going under slot this time.
Not that I'm not going to be satisfied, but it's just at number one, it is a little disappointing.
Right.
It makes sense 2, 5, wherever, because you can at least talk yourself into, oh, well, they wanted that number one guy, but he's gone, so they can't take him. And now they view these guys as really similar. So why not take the guy that is going to take the slightly cheaper deal? You know what I mean? Versus when you are number one, you need to get number one. Like that is you have the pick of the litter, and you need to make that work. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and we'll approach this topic again, I'm sure, in a couple months as the draft gets closer and as news comes out. But yeah, it's exciting. They're getting the first overall pick, which is awesome, and the Orioles farm system is going to get even better. So I think those are kind of the big topics. The last thing we wanted to mention was like some of the players that for right now are listed as starting at the respective levels. However, these are probably going to change. Well, we're not going to even list them. Let me start that over again, and I'll just edit that. The last thing I think we just wanted to talk about is kind of do like a quick like run around of which level we're most interested in paying attention to this year. There's intriguing prospects at every level. Eli, you've clearly chosen to go see the Bowie Bay Sox first, but is that the level that the Orioles you're most excited to watch closely this year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are two that I really cue in on. I'll start with Bowie, and I think that AA infield of Jordan Westberg, Joey Ortiz, and Gunnar Henderson is that in itself across the diamond could be, the three that pair up with Ryan Mountcastle eventually. They are all pretty well regarded. Obviously, Joey a bit behind the other two. But Westberg and Henderson broke into the top 100 prospects over the last year. Westberg is somebody who's on every like honorable mention list as somebody who's coming up pretty close. He just had a really good showing in spring training. And Ortiz has been on the rise for the last year. So I think just that group as a unit is intriguing, definitely. And then we should be seeing DL Hall starting out there as well, is where he's currently listed. That, and then I'll also point out a good number of our high, like, college bat prospects finished out. They're currently listed at low A. I could see some of these starting at high A. But Delmarva currently has, like, Kobe Mayo, Connor Norby, Colton Cowser, and Kerstad all listed on their roster, along with Cesar Prieto. So I could definitely see that being extremely interesting to watch, that offensive unit being as good as any in the low minors. And I'm excited to see how far all of them rise throughout the course of this year.
Yeah, I think that's totally – it's awesome that there's multiple levels of, like, storylines there that you can check out. It's just a very exciting time to follow Orioles minor league baseball. Jesse, what about you? Any level intriguing you in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything really more to say. I just don't. Like, of course, AAA, obviously has our top heavy prospects, but like Eli was saying, like the AA, the infield, I mean, yeah, I mean, it basically for the minors, it's as exciting, I think, as it could be. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I said it on our episode where we previewed the major league level, but I think this year at the major league level is going to be about the pitchers, whereas the following next season will be more about the hitters up there. So then for me, this season is going to be more about those infielders that can make the jump next year. So the infield is kind of a mess in the majors right now. And to make sure, or to see what Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westbrook, and Joey Ortiz can do this year. Plus, Connor Norby could explode this year and be really good and jump up into that group. And Kobe Mayo could do the same thing. So I think I'm going to kind of just follow sort of which way the wind blows on the infield. And I think some weeks that's going to be Bowie. I think other weeks that might be high A, where like you said, Eli, I think Mayo and Norby and Cowser will probably jump up there really fast if they don't start there. So I think those are the two levels to really watch. Whereas I think AAA might get a little boring after the first few weeks of the season, because I think Adley's going to be gone, Grayson's going to be gone, and I think AAA might be a little bit boring, which I'm fine with. I don't want to pay attention to AAA all that closely this year.
But even then, we're talking about infielders like the likes of Rylan Bannon and Taron Vavra are, they're both at AAA right now, and they're not as, high ceiling prospects as the other ones we talked about, but it could be interesting to see their progression and see if, I fully expect them to pop into the majors this year.
They'll be major leaguers, right?
Right. Yeah. Vavra, he's one of the ones I'm kind of wanting to keep an eye on because his skill set is very interesting to me. Not that of like a starter every day, but like a very valuable piece to have on your roster day in and day out. So Vavra's one I'm pretty interested in.
Definitely.
So, that was kind of our real quick run through the Orioles minor league system. This is something we're going to touch on throughout the year just because it remains very important to where the Orioles are as an organization. So we're not going to do anything thorough. Like I said, check out On the Verge for all your like Orioles specific minor league concerns. But yeah, it's just fun to touch on them every now and then. And Eli will give us some feedback on what the Bowie Bay Sox are looking like this year and how good Joey Ortiz will be.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
my one game scouting report.
That's all it takes.
It will be comprehensive, right? I've got a keen eye.
That's why you're here. But yeah, that's all we've got this week for this episode. We will get back into some sort of week-to-week game recaps and news following this episode. As we've mentioned before, please subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever it is. We should be there. Share us with your friends. That's how we grow the podcast. And we just really appreciate you listening. And you can also follow us on Twitter at The Warehouse Pod. So check us out there. All right, guys. Well, this was fun. And next episode, we get to talk about some actual baseball that counts. That's pretty exciting.
Oh, man.
It's been a long time. It's been a long winter, but we're here. But all right. Until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
Thank you for listening.